Hi, my name is Amy Westrup, and I will be reading pages 21 through 30. I don't know if I'm supposed to be looking at the camera. I will not be looking at the camera. I will be reading. So here we go. Hope I do this correctly for you. Page 21. And aren't, and all the patterns and information universally and locally around us tells us that. Arguably, taste, sound, feeling, sight, smell, or any other senses and ways to describe or experience anything to you or me is seemingly impossibly difficult for a particle, or subatomically, quantumly, or metaphysically deeper, yet also now possible and probable to do. And somehow, through the entire collective particles of the entirety of funk, time, and space, we have evolved into those abilities right now, and over enough time we will continue to understand more of it, and or not, and further continue to understand everything until we, as a more advanced funk, are pretty much omnipotent and omnipresent, and potentially, eventually, paradoxically, create the next ourselves, to repeat and or expand the process, or not. And something about the explanation and understanding of all of that and the funk is both believable and not believable, as well as variably comprehensible and to every individual, so the act of describing itself exponentially difficult and increasingly both harder and easier to understand as we experience more of it. Because of all the patterns experiences around us, it sometimes teaches us both to avoid and or disregard some learning or experiences while still somehow learning, experiencing, and or progressively attributing to the funk, whether it be your experience or the cause of another. You can choose to not react or understand or not want to understand, or even simply not be able to understand without actually making a choice to do so or not. It is all still happening, and it has happened up to this point. So I am proposing these collective points and knowledge of these patterns and observations and experiences of the funk is somehow important to share with whatever and whoever wants to attempt to learn or expand from with this information or question it. And by doing so or not, it amplifies itself within and without a somewhat and beyond a trans-universal, morphogenic-like power of itself across lower and higher, outer and inner echelons and holigarchies of funk existence and non-existence. If I chose to not write down and share this collection of thoughts and information, then these words I have written and or shared would not be here. You would not be reading or interacting with me or this information, and we would not have now in some way learned from it or be further expanded by it, or have been influenced by its existence. Some past instincts or judgments have often misrepresented or not this pattern to be wrong or too crazy to be true in some way, and it is also isn't dependent on who and or what you are and how you interpret it and use that new or old information experience. And that often leads us to dismissing or brushing over past, present, and or future discoveries of patterns of connection, what we think versus what we know. September 2020. So again, I understand that this information is incomplete and or may never be completed. April 18th, 2022, and is always, as sometimes not, and varying levels of being understood, which is why I request we work together and keep expanding, advancing, and double-checking it. If someone or something doesn't, no one and or nothing will until it does or is. March 2023. If we continue challenging, refining, and expanding our quests for epistemic knowledge, eventually we reach closer and closer to the next step across our destinations. February 16th, 2024. And it makes about as much sense as we are and or aren't able to make of it. August 12th, 2024. With that being said, something can make complete sense and still be misunderstood. So to be understood or to understand partially depends on the efforts of who or whatever is doing either. Both the teacher and the learner, the giver and the taker, have unlimited dynamic revolving roles to play. Does that make sense? To me, it does make sense. It's all about the exchange of communication and connection. There's a note. Well, possibly with the funk idea, but it moves into fantasy territory without specifically how one could measure, defect it in a way separate from our current knowledge and without adding the "but it's everything" excuse. That was in blue. That's someone else's comment. April 18th, 2022. But it is and isn't everything, including not/nothing. Do you, the reader, and potentially this person, still not see the patterns between what you and I are both speculating? How is it, and all has seemed to be, and how concurrently predictable and unpredictable the funk can be and is? It is to me, epistemologically and physiologically exciting to hear that this person or thing functionally in a way I could understand, and now you, this reader, or someone, something experiencing this moment, interpreted these theories and questioned them and added to them, and now I am able to do so in return as well. Who or what it is to eventually say or decide if these patterns of funk collection and connection are going to continue to expand, or if they ever do or don't. But we are currently observing this and experiencing this information. And so yes, what we don't know is still theoretically there. But now we again are aware of all this information, and or lack of. Currently, in case those decisions or events even do or don't happen. Everything is now stored onto the funk soul, that hitchhiker's Google Internet-like book or idea similar to a collective storage much like a brain or hard drive, or a social historical consciousness similar to the internet or further ideas or experiences. We can save, recall, and redistribute information to a higher quantum degree of influence and connection, and seemingly are continuing to do so until eventually, again, unable, unwilling, or for some other reason. I see whoever was asking this is understanding in their own perspective and questioning it, but not to the complete extent of ultimate connection. I am trying to explain, and I am also, and am not doing the same. That is what I, and seemingly we, have been constructed towards, by making our own individual and group decisions. And that information is being stored in everything, and sometimes nothing, in various ways through each of us, everything, nothing, and beyond. August 12th, 2024. Additionally, fantasy is still partially a form of reality via surreality. There's a note. I guess it's cuter than we're just biological robots that die for good once our brain shuts down, but so far also just an idea thrown out. Hard to disprove due to how ubiquitous the funk is supposed to be, but pretty hard to prove either. So either doesn't seem so much, yo. Now continuing. I am again thinking of how this person is reminding me of the ways I attempt or have attempted to communicate now or in the past. I sometimes have said meh and yo in my speech, and have talked and typed like they seem to be doing currently in a similar way. You likely have or haven't as well, but are now a part of the lingo and understanding of its experience and creation. I believe it serves helpful or progressively to express levels of transferred communication within similar experience times across the funk. It's another pattern example that we have evolved from, out of, and into creation reality, and are currently using the collection of itself to expand each other, ourselves, and itself, everything, using language, text, thought, experience, being, and beyond. The translation and the transference of funk into and across each other and everything. I also feel and perceive the funk to be a more warming idea than something less subjectively optimistic, like the example you provided. But it is also just as objectively pessimistic, like the concept of completely shutting off a computer or our brains shutting down, and that potentially being the end of our consciousness. unless our saves and influences are re-uploaded or redistributed as a transference form of the moments leading up to this and those moments and beyond. Partially, what we currently understand or experience is that given enough time, we physically, as humans, or even as energy, eventually decay, perish, transform, transfer, etc. But our funk mythology lasts forever across the funk, beyond, after, and before its creation and being. Our body perishes, but our influences, or soul, is forever a part of the structure and history of funk. If you turn off or destroy a cell phone or computer and then have no way of powering whatever the once functioning object back on and retrieving the information within themselves, then the information is potentially gone unless stored somewhere else, like an internet or cloud, or our billions of now closer connected brains, or the physical matter and energy of the universe, or whatever comes next, the funk cloud and beyond. Still, the objects and the information that was once inside is forever part of the funk. February 19th, 2024. If you were to write some words on a slip of paper, never show it or tell the words to anyone, and then burn the paper, the experiences and the influences of you, the paper, the writing utensil, the words, the fire, and the ashes are forever a part of funk existence, influence, history, and soul. Our physical bodies or containers expire in some way over time, and our perceptive receptacles reduce down and redistribute over the rest of existence until they reach a conjunctional merge with the fabrics of reality and re-become ourselves, and itself as the funk again, and everything in, out, or around it. Eventually, in that form, quantumly, and or beyond, and part of the current funk, we were and still are together every molecule, monad, and everything that ever interacted or had influenced with you, us, and before you and us. And all of our quantumly exposed states are now expanding from these experiences, efforts, and existences within our fractions of itself and our existences and realities. And those existences spawn more existences and realities, and the awareness and unawareness of everything and nothing, more or less. To highlight and point out these observations may seem futile, but seemingly by pattern, it is what is working for us so far and is growing in various understandings. So imagine if this information was stored inside the smallest form of energy, being, or thing far into the distant future, when we have become beyond molecules or monads, scattered throughout space and time, as the entire history of you, ourselves, and you are surrounding time and space, and we are able to re-extract information and or experience from it. The ability and information to turn that aforementioned computer or receptacle back on and or access the information and or memories within it, or yourself or ourselves, then it is always still theoretically, potentially, still in some way existing and expanding all of you, us, and whatever else interacts or influences directly or indirectly with the subatomic quantum funk structure of itself and the influence to objects or ourselves to each other and everything. And this moment, all past moments and all future moments connect these possibilities, whether fact or fiction. February 19th, 2024. Though currently, while that level of memory retrieval seems an impossibility, the effects of everything, either fact or fiction, bring us here, there, and everywhere. Perhaps one day we will have the ability to use the fabrics of funk to reach through across space and time and experience what you theoretically wrote on the aforementioned imagined slip of paper we imagined and have burned. Perhaps some forms of funk or all funk itself can already do so, or perhaps not, to be determined, or not. After our entire collective experience across years of observing and discussing these patterns of funk phenomenon and how to explain them and what they perhaps mean by experience, we do and don't understand if they are personally and or collectively overall good, bad, average, hopeful, worrisome, or whatever or not, whatever human or not word, expression, emotion, or relation you can imagine or believe, and regardless of every input and output, they still are happening, and the funk is expanding from all of it. Everything has and had to happen to lead up to these moments and beyond. So seemingly, no matter what happens, you're likely going to worry about it at times and not worry about it at other times, and or a mixture of superposition of the spectrum between and or beyond. You can experience black and or white as well as gray, and beyond those are red and orange and blue and 4 and 7 and elephants and bang boom, and what you ate 17 days ago and the effects that has on Jupiter 3 trillion years from now, and somehow concurrently everything I am saying is making at least some strange sense to you, or not, and we are all still continuing further more connected to the funk, even closer directly and or indirectly, whether I or you are under any influence or not, and whatever state of mind or without we may be in or out of. I kind of wish I was under the influence right now. This would probably make more sense to me, but I am enjoying it. We are all together transitioning through reality, time, etc., aka funk. If we or anything don't do or be, then of course no one and or nothing will. But now that we and or the funk have done and are experiencing all doings and beings through ourselves only partially, things still can, cannot, will, won't, etc. Again, I can only currently suggest, propose, and or postulate to you these ideas and examples, both with and or without past, present, and future proofs and defeaters. So yes, it is absolutely your choice to believe it or not after you've been acquainted with the influence of the ideas from the funk phenomenon, mythologies and experiences leading up to the discussions and or influences of this collective information. That is your faith, and I, in my perspective, understand that pattern of choice to currently be experienced or described as a formed or even an unformed idea, because again, as myself and others have observed, experienced, and studied over time the reactions of belief, skepticism, absolutist rejection, or not believing anything, and or various levels of acceptance or denial, that everyone, everything exists in their own way within a collectively redistributed shared time and experience, or funk, and has or hasn't a conscious ability of some choice in the matter. I still chose and choose to share this information, attempting to describe how the funk connects us and has provided everything up to this event, occasion, and what may come of that. It has taught us that writing, recording, and sharing moments as experiences, either good or bad, expands and provides accessible history longer and at a faster rate than just a fraction of experiences living and expiring within it and without it, that doesn't and or aren't able to re-examine and learn with, from history/funk, and assists with connecting time and reality, past, present, and future. So arguably, it's not worth much, but it also is. What if now that this idea is being presented across time, space, experience, and beyond, somehow or something decides it's worth giving me $1? $1 is in observance a mathematically and physically significant amount more than no dollars. So now it has at least become $1 worth in financial value. then let's say that that dollar pays for all this to be sent to hundreds, thousands, billions, or more. Although in a way already has been being discussed with everyone, everything I have already discussed and shared it with for less than $1. Through the people I've known or met personally, and also those interconnectedly influenced, or that I do not yet know or may never know across the internet or universe, I have already earned more than $1 of its subjective and objective worth as information. So I know the seeds have been planted and it's growing similarly as the patterns of life and the funk seem to do. But financial growth is only important to me enough to selfishly desire to keep my environment and myself selflessly prosperous. True, wealth to my personal selfish desire is gained through knowledge, experience, influence, reach, connection, and love. But overall, yes, currently and across human history, money absolutely does help pave those paths of influential reach or purchase others, and or purchase more others to pave themselves and itself across time, space, and funk. Or consider something outside of financial significance. I postulate this information and study to be worth it if it simply even inspires any thought or influence beyond metaphysical funk experience or existence in the slightest way to anyone or anything. It is fairly enlightening that since I have collected and discussed these universal studies of collective experiences and began this personal and group study of experiences we are experiencing, and further case group personal research, that a significant amount of people around me, since this information has been written or shared, maybe even published, have been at least somewhat curious about it and understanding of it enough to clearly attribute back to it rather than not get it or it be too much to understand. Albeit exoteric, it took me years to be able to explain all of this in a way that someone other than myself could comprehend it, through full study, this treatise, or a Cliff Notes, Spark Notes, or shorthand version. This is the beginning of page 26. Pardon me. That to me is personally worth more than $1. And who knows, it could still lead up to many dollars. And then hot dog. It's the best of both worlds. I subsequently will see, experience whatever comes after that or doesn't. As I have expressed in the past, it further financially prosperous from these presentations. I would like to use these finances to help others and myself reach even further close points of connection and beyond. Together, selflessly and selfishly and beyond, for our progressive survival as conscious and connected beings and or interfaceable objects of creation and influence and beyond. If financial status precludes the credibility of those collected ideas, then proudly and transparently I can tell you that I have already made some form of profit, knowledge, and experience from this idea of existing within and expanding with and from the funk, and have also so far successfully attempted to relay the information to you and our reality, and still apparently I am explaining it to you now in an expanding attempt for anything, everything to attribute towards it and collect further understandings and experiences. The chances of doing that currently, where I, you, and we exist within, is now great enough for us to achieve more and more, and will now continue rising in probability, although still a challenge requiring effort. And while yes, still not knowing for sure, but again, by all of these patterns discussed, it seemingly seems and appears to be so. So far, I keep receiving more information, and that information is and will now be accessible to you and anyone interested in expanding with and from it. Note, January 9th, 2020. Since December 5th, my connections to these answers have been, for the most part, nonstop, and either by patterns of coincidence or the greater power of the funk, everyone and everything has been connecting me closer. It's quite surreal, as if life, the funk, or something is influencing and guiding me towards further understanding of itself and ourselves. April 18th, 2022. And these connections and interconnections to further connections and interconnections to reality, existence and beyond, come and go and grow and grow. August 12th, 2024, and it keeps expanding. Round and round, repetition after repetition, again and again, for currently an unfathomable amount of time, and as patterns and theories and or studies like evolution and or advanced machine learning suggest, it is seemingly the things that survive longest and to have caused a greater significant lasting impact within themselves and their environments that continue to improve everything involved with it and further generations in whatever way is subjectively, objectively best for the funk. I can't agree with this. I think some technologies aren't improving our lives and our connectivity. I think they are taking away from it because we hide behind screens and technology and don't have physical connection. And we don't get to see the results and how our physical connection and verbal connection affect people in real time in front of us through nonverbal. Like teaching a child, so back to what you've written, the bottom of page 26. Like teaching a child to ride a bicycle, or how to read, or a program to write and or play music for you, or to calculate and solve problems, or a robot how to walk, or a car to self-drive, or a plant to grow, or an element to be, that is all in a way advancing that and those moments somehow within and across funk. Though also by teaching a child to ride a bicycle, or writing a program to play music or problem solving, and a car how to drive itself, or hydrogen and oxygen to become water, all of those things still may never know of the Pyref through 9B, I don't know what that word is, or the funk. I assume that is how the funk is written out in a different language. Or whatever equation, solution, or description of what I am describing to you eventually turns out to be. But with the evolutionary assistance of technologies within or beyond itself, these moments now all currently exist together, indirectly, either forever unaware or eventually linked to become aware of each other and their intersectional connections. And again, in these moments, I am calling it the funk, but you may think of it as something else, and that is okay. It has been okay up to this point, and very likely will be after. Additionally, if I or anyone, anything does not ever attempt to do what I am doing, and or we have done, and inspire, influence what we are now learning so we can attribute to each other or even further knowledge and questioning, then again the information and or experience we are gathering sort of slows down or doesn't happen until it eventually picks up again, whether physically or metaphysically, quantumly or mathematically, knowledgeably, subjectively, spiritually, imaginably, etc. Ocean sharks, to my knowledge, will probably never understand the funk or recognize the funk like you and I are able in any form that I can translate to you for now, but it can be imagined or in a way predicted or experienced, even if through thought the things we have over time eventually connected and described as or by sharks that live in the ocean or whatever they call themselves, or eventually further to be known as. Perhaps they have already experienced beyond this moment greater connections unbeknownst to us. Even though, just in animation, Jabberjaw played drums in a band and solved crimes. Predictably, Or possibly someone could be nicknamed Ocean Shark, and they now think I am talking directly to them, or not, and I both am and am not. Both just in case. Hi, Ocean Shark. Keep doing and being yourself, buddy. I'm proud of you for reaching the point of our existence. Let's keep going, both in idea and application. March 18th, 2024. How can a 3-pound mass of jelly that you can hold in the palm imagine angels, contemplate the meaning of infinity, and even question its own place in the cosmos? Especially awe-inspiring is the fact that any single brain, including yours, is made up of atoms that were forged in hearts of countless far-flung stars billions of years ago. These particles drifted for eons and light years until gravity and change brought them together here now. These atoms now form a conglomerate, your brain. And that can not only ponder the very stars that gave it birth, but can also think about its own ability to think and wonder about its own ability to wonder. With the arrival of humans, it has been said, the universe has suddenly become conscious of itself. This truly is the greatest mystery of all. V.S. Ramachandran. This is the final paragraph on the bottom of page 27. In my time of study towards the funk, I have also personally and group studied a lot of long-form and short-form improv. Not stand-up comedy, but also, yes, sometimes improv is involved with stand-up comedy, and I've also participated in stand-up comedy as well. Maybe this is sit-down, lie-down, stand-up, repositionable comedy and entertainment. And through that, I have observed, experienced, learned things that I have witnessed to be both wonderfully successful and sometimes quite wonderfully unsuccessful. Some things aren't even aware of the existence of improv, or they are and don't know how to describe it yet, or how it is either indirectly or directly involved in influencing their lives. In these studies of improv and or the funk, we are taught to observe patterns and why sometimes events and or scenes do and do not work, and or do not work. Using tools like the application of yes and if this then what, those two concepts and more can be interpreted and applied to so many applications and situations, whether on or off stage, with results that are often, currently to my knowledge, immeasurable, but with time and experience could become more calculable, measurable, teachable, and experienced. So if we continue to observe improv, funk, etc., and discuss it, we get closer to understanding how to reach those solutions and or experiences, or we won't. Everything will continue to keep happening in the ways that they do. I find this interesting because I think if we paused some of our technological advances, we could connect on a more human level and then improve those advances with the understanding of what we actually need. Paragraph 2 on page 28. Sometimes we have a lot of fun doing improv or existing within the funk, and or sometimes we don't. Occasionally, the ways we know things to be and how we handle it all and ourselves differs with a mixture of success and failure, and the education each is able to interpret, extrapolate, draw conclusions, and grow from. But again, change, no matter how large or small, is observable and applicable, and historically now in such an amount that it is reapplying to itself, just as we are also reapplying back to it as we have been, and statistically, but not yet able to confirm completely or prove to be exactly possible. Wow, that was a very confusing sentence. Whew. As conscious beings, we are able to process information, think about it, and then add to the idea and observe its patterns until something else eventually recognizes those patterns and applies, copies, transfers them to its own learning, conclusions, and actions, while unconscious beings and objects have a natural way of interacting and reacting to each other, everything without needing an extra internalization and reapplication. So if you ever see someone and or something else also learning about the funk or philosophy or something similar and or really anything, everything else, then you are also becoming closer to seeing the patterns of how it both is and is not happening, being, and how to explain or describe anything, everything to others, something else, and the difficulties of doing so. March 18th, 2024. Throughout the infinite, the forces are in a perfect balance, and hence the energy of a single thought may determine the motion of the universe. Nikola Tesla. I do not know what you had for breakfast, or even if you had breakfast, but if you told me, I would then become further influenced by its happening and what to possibly do with that information together and or personally, and afterward, potentially, I could then possibly want whatever you had for breakfast or something else, or go get something or whatever myself, or do whatever comes next radially and tangentially. Or if you told me, this poison is deadly, or I learned from other gathered information, experience, or influence, or not, that poison is deadly, then I would most likely stay away from it, or not, because I then would have an idea of what poison is and its effect. Unless otherwise I, you, and, or we were to learn new information and were able to experience poison with or without its current known effects, death or illness. Then, in that reality, perhaps that poison is at that time a medicine and can be applied healthily or as in an antidote or something else, as we have learned some poisons and experiences to potentially be. Through experience, influence, awareness, we are cautious of the effects and experimenting with poisons because we know what they can do and have done. But in the investigating, experience stops there. Then that is all we will likely know until someone or something begins to gather more data, information on poison, and learns more of the figures or figures something out, and then shares that information, not Allah, if this, then what? I know and understand that a dragon like Smaug of The Hobbit, Alduin, the World Eater from Elder Scrolls, the dragons from Games of Thrones, or any physical, spiritual, written, read, dreamed, imagined, or any other form of reality of dragon could have the ability to set someone on fire or potentially kill them. Though in our current observed reality, dragons are fictitious, fantasy, and therefore are very unlikely to harm us. Additionally, in our shared realities, within or without fact or fiction, dragons have to some, but not all, also been described to have killed or been defeated by knights and people and villages and or hoarded gold, or to be friendly, or only pre-cohabitatively made someone afraid until acquainted or inspired something to feel some way about dragons, and or anything according to all the collective data we now have access to about subjective fantasy or any other information we have collected about dragons as a whole, and or as individuals with every level of supervision and interaction, and also lack of. My goodness, am I thoroughly confused. Whew. All of what we know and everything related to dragons is now a part of the collective mythology of dragons within the collective mythology of the funk, as it expands and doesn't. So, if you were to come across a dragon, or even become a dragon at some point in future time, your reaction to the experience of that moment has been collectively influenced, preconceived by our collected experience or lack of, with how we personally or as a group actually would interact with dragons if when we arrived at that moment. That would be very cool. Our collective and personal improvisational instincts will kick in once we are experiencing a dragon, whether we know how to or not, as any of us would naturally react to a situation, however, whether we know it or not, as any of us would naturally react to the situation, however we would whenever in that moment. We are acting under the influence of ourselves, each other, our environments, anything, everything, and the inverse invasive possibility of nothing and or off. Eventually, all of that data experience, as we can concurrently observe it, becomes habit and instinct, or a mixture of, or it ceases until it reforms or increases again. We each interpret how to process this information and save it for later, more and or less effectively and efficiently to a degree that is always arguably better or worse. And since you can find access in information inside, outside of anything beyond ourselves, like our computers, phones, for us together, and those successes or abilities of increasing successes are increasingly successfully and or unsuccessfully until further more once they are experienced to an expanding or reduced form of itself from the influence of what is and is not itself. Whew. Or again, for the umpteenth time proposed that everything from within and without the funk, from the questionable beginnings and ends, used to further calculate the incalculability, is getting more and more understandable, while constantly creating even more to understand. The asymptote is getting closer and closer to X, Y, Z, or beyond, even though it may or may not seemingly or believably ever touch X, Y, Z, or any other variable. It also potentially eventually does and can be calculated closer and closer and saved and shared much more easily using our advancing technologies, experiences, and histories. Each of us can almost do nothing and still universally expand from it somehow at this point, because within our personal nothings is a great amount of something. As things, we are more 50-50. They are, as I'm proposing, providing and withdrawing the information we have gathered, seemingly reaching, expanding, or transferring into each other everything, and providing further answers and reactions. Instead of XYZ, our graphs could potentially not only connect ABC, but also to Delaware or a molecule, and make more and more sense how to translate and relay those connections, because we are over time experiencing the closer integers and steps to the solutions, and yet we are together, not yet there, or perhaps even will be, but are functionally continuing to experience the funk as it expands and progresses, with and or without our existences and or absence. Rather than 50-50, the equation and solution could be plus minus 50 over plus minus 50, or x derivative 5 divided by d, or silver, or an engine of some sort, always calculating closer and closer to further solutions, just as we are now. Haven't engines historically and observably evolved and additionally aren't there also numerous metaphors, examples, and descriptions for an engine over time and experience? I propose these growths or expansions of information experience are seemingly additionally happening to anything, everything, and nothing. But it is also now in our equations and realities to also try to prove all of this everything and nothing wrong and right, as I and you are currently attempting to do, and in some occasions have multiple complicated and or open-ended answers, much like in a test or data put through software, or a result of something that can now be communicated through an experience of everything feeling at once or a combination of such feelings or none at all. I can, to my ability of funk perception, at this moment describe the experiences of sound, smell, touch, thought, and taste that this information we have been created from and into that inspires and influences us, and we have access to a closer amount of all of it, as well as our potential end of it. It is more than half, also not, more and or less, while also being so. It is beyond yin and yang, but also very much rounded up to yin and yang. Further understanding beyond binary opposition and harmony, forever finding balance by being whole itself and also a part of the next outer and or inner, greater and or lesser Hollands. What if we extended the third dimensional XYZ grid to become fourth dimensional and to then include W? And W is now observable and experienced like XYZ, and closer, calculated, viewed, experienced, and transferable. W is going to begin to make more sense or evolve into something else and explain why X, Y, Z, W, U, V, S, T, and Larry are connected, and how to share that information over time, unless it is not achievable, able to be achieved, or forgotten. But currently, here is a description of the idea. So the steps to it are so far, in a way, functioning in possibility. Impossibility and non-being are only such until they become imaginable, possible, and are. Consider the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon theory. We can take a collected amount of instances and relative points, people across time, and connect the degrees to them with the information and abilities we currently have. With more time, the events of... And that is the end of page 30. I think I would like to follow up with a recording of my thoughts on some of these paragraphs because I'm still processing them. I hope this is what you were looking for. I am sorry if I messed up in some of the reading, but thank you for letting me be a part of this.